Listen to this.
It is time to end a system where after you've been in it for 3 years, you're guaranteed a job for life, whether you're great, whether you're fair, or whether you're awful.
That was New Jersey Governor Chris Christie with some strong words for teachers' unions. Our next guest agrees that unions are protecting some pretty bad teachers lately, and believe it or not, he's a teacher himself. Joining us from Atlanta is teacher and author of How to Survive on a Teacher's Salary, Danny Kofke. I hope I said that last name right, Danny. So go ahead, sir. Difficult to fire a teacher. You have a couple of horror stories. Give us one of them.
Well, actually, here in Georgia, we don't have what's known as a union. We have a different organization, very similar, but they're not as strong. But when I did teach in Florida, there was a particular case. At that time, I taught kindergarten, and there was a teacher down the hall from me. She probably had 20 years on me. I was like a third-year teacher. And I'd go by her room during my break, and every afternoon there would be a movie on, kids just watching a video. And I remember thinking at that time, I could go back to my classroom right now. I could teach the greatest lesson on earth. My students could learn, they could grow 5 grade levels, but she's still going to get paid more money than I am because of the way the salary schedule works. And then come to find out, I asked a few people that had been there for a while that she was the classic shuffle case. The principal tried to get rid of her, union fodder, so moved to the computer lab, then to the library.
Stay there. Union, okay. What happened here? The union stepped in and said, no, you can't fire her. She's one of ours?
They backed, yes. That was my understanding, correct.
And now tell us about what they call them, the rubber rooms. I guess if you are found to be somewhat of a bad teacher, you don't really have to work too much. You can go to these rooms and do what? Crossword puzzles, spend some time, hang out?
Right. Right, and those are more prominent. Here in Georgia, I have not heard of those, but I know up in the Northeast, in some of those areas I have. And I've heard recently they have been shut down and they're no longer, allowed to do that. But there were some stories of teachers that would spend 1 year, 2 years while their investigation is going on, and they would go to these rubber rooms, and reports where some teachers were writing books, some were doing crossword puzzles, what you just said. So, I don't know for sure. I wasn't there. I can't tell you. I didn't see that firsthand. But these are just some of the reports that I've heard, yeah.
Just so we have some sort of perspective, guys, if you can pull that full screen up on how much average teachers make, the average salary of teachers around the country here. Check it out. New York, $71,000. California, $70,000. Massachusetts, $60,000. These are big numbers, you guys. We're not talking peanuts here. We're not talking $25,000. I mean, we're paying a lot of money to these people to do this job. Let me bring it to the panel a little bit. Representative, we're talking teachers unions, but we've heard the same stories with the UAW. Remember when they had the furlough people? Instead of furloughing, they put them in rooms and paid them to do crossword puzzles.
Well, it's ridiculous. My mother was a teacher. My sister, my wife taught. I have great sympathy and empathy with teachers. But good grief, since half of all teachers are below average, do the math, we ought to be moving forward and continually striving to increase the level of success of teachers. And instead, we've made sure that the worst are going to stay there no matter what.
What's wrong with tying a teacher's performance via the kids' grades to their pay? It sounds like a great idea to me.
What's the United States without competition? What would happen to these professions if we made all professions like this? There would be no competition. There would be no strive to be better. And that's exactly what's happened with these teachers right now. I agree, this is a very sensitive situation. But in order to get the best, the brightest, and the most ambitious, we need to make this a competitive
Danny, what do you think of that idea, tying your salary to the test scores of the kids you teach?
I'm okay with that. The thing is, and we have to look at it because there are some teachers that have the lower performing students. So, I mean, there has to be a different way to measure it than solely test scores. But what I've said is, at the beginning...
Not solely test scores, but increase in test scores. In other words, start with base.
Exactly.
And if you bring it up from a 75 to an 80, guess what? That's 5%. Maybe you get a, 2.5% bump. Whatever the metric is, but an increase should certainly fall on the teacher.
Absolutely, and I'm all for that. And this is what I've thought. Maybe when they first come in August, September, depending on where you are in the country, that first couple of weeks of school, you take the same test that you give at the end of the year. You have the same students, and then you can base it, okay? This is what you scored in August or September.
Bingo, that's exactly what I'm driving at, guys. Hang on there. I want to get Garland. You all right with this?
Well,
it sounds like a pretty good idea.
Two things. Number one, that sounds similar to some of the things that President Obama has, in fact, endorsed. The other thing is this. Why do we have to start with the middle class? If you work for Goldman Sachs, you can blow up the economy and get a $10 million bonus. But if you're in the middle class, if you're a worker, if you're a teacher,
Here's the
then,
difference.
then it's going to be
The
tied.
difference is Goldman Sachs pays their people with their profits.
No, that
The
with
government-
And our
the government
profits.
pays-
And our profits.
The government pay. Well, okay.
Right or
Fair
wrong,
enough.
but our profits.
Fair
Fair
enough.
enough.
Where's the-
Should have gone
Listen,
for
I hear you.
bankrupt.
But,
You know
but
that formula,
No one
Eric-
here is. Hold on. No one here is condoning the bailouts of Goldman Sachs. No one. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying in private business, it's different when the taxpayer is paying the salaries.
You
of the
know,
people.
that formula would work, but you would have to really evaluate the children that you're teaching. Some of them have this ADHD and all these learning disabilities. You can't really have the teacher be rated on that because maybe the child doesn't have the capacity to get that 90 as much as you teach that child. So in reality, you got to look at it all the way down the line. You just can't say, well, if they don't get 90s, you're not getting a raise. Maybe the child doesn't have the ability.
Y'all have all pointed out the real key, and sorry to use y'all, we need a second person plural, but the key is local control. Everything everybody said that's a problem is derived from the fact that we've had a one-size-fits-all from Washington. If you respect the 10th Amendment and that power on education is reserved to the states and the people, the local control ran the schools better. We had better student
boards.
success when the school boards were responsible without Washington
What do you say about
telling
that, Danny?
the locals how to do
you like
their
this
job.
idea?
Absolutely correct. That it's a one-size-fits-all. In education, there's so much in between, and a lot of people look at education issues as being either black or white with no gray, and that's all it is gray matter for me. I mean, it's just all in between. So I think that is correct, that if it was more locally controlled rather than some people many, many miles away making the rules and regulations, the people that are in the town, in the city, they know what's best for their community.
Very
Absolutely.
good. Danny Kofke, appreciate